Let me tell you something that's going to sound completely insane at first, but by the end of this, you're going to understand why a small group of people right now are quietly positioning themselves to capture one of the greatest wealth transfers in modern history. I'm talking about something so obvious it's hidden in plain sight, something the institutions don't want you paying attention to yet because they're still accumulating. This isn't about the next hot tech stock. This isn't about crypto hype or meme coins. This is about a physical metal that civilization literally cannot function without, and we're about to run out of it at the exact moment demand is about to go parabolic. Stay with me, because what I'm about to explain will change how you see the next decade of markets, money, and where real wealth is actually stored. I bought Bitcoin in 2013, not because I was smarter than everyone else, but because I understood one fundamental principle that most people miss: scarcity plus utility equals inevitable price discovery. Bitcoin had a hard cap, 21 million coins, that's it. The code couldn't be changed, the supply was fixed. And as more people wanted it, the math was simple and brutal. The price had to go up. Now, over a decade later, I'm making another bet. But this time, it's not digital, it's physical. And the supply constraint is even more severe than Bitcoin, because you can't just mine it with electricity and computer chips. I'm talking about copper. And over the last 2 months, I bought 3 tons of it. That's right, 3,000 kilograms of physical copper. I rented a storage unit just to hold it, and I'm buying 1 ton more every single month going forward. Now, before you think I've lost my mind, let me walk you through exactly why this is happening, why the smartest money in the world is starting to position for this, and why copper is about to transition from being just an industrial commodity into something far more valuable, a strategic monetary asset. Because when you understand the forces at play here, you'll realize this isn't speculation. This is front-running an inevitability. Let's start with something everyone is talking about, but nobody is connecting the dots on: artificial intelligence. You hear about AI everywhere: ChatGPT, generative models, autonomous systems. Everyone's excited about what AI can do. But nobody is asking the most important question: what does AI actually need to exist? It needs power, massive, unimaginable amounts of power. An AI data center doesn't just use a little more electricity than a normal building, it uses exponentially more. We're talking about server farms that require the electrical output of small cities just to run the computations. And here's the kicker: the existing power grid was not built for this, not even close. A recent report from 2026 projects that data center capacity will increase tenfold by 2040. 10 times. Think about that. That means we need to build the equivalent of the entire current data center infrastructure of the world 10 times over in the next 15 years. And every single one of those data centers is a copper monster. Why? Because AI servers don't just need power, they need cooling. Intense, industrial-grade cooling. And the most efficient cooling systems rely on liquid cooling technology, which uses copper plates, copper piping, and copper heat exchangers. You can't cool an AI server farm with air conditioning. The heat output is too intense. You need liquid systems that can transfer heat away at extreme efficiency. And copper is the best thermal conductor that's economically viable at scale. But it's not just the cooling, it's the power delivery. To get electricity from the grid into these data centers and distribute it across thousands of server racks, you need wiring. Lots of it. Miles and miles of high-capacity copper wiring. And here's the part that should terrify anyone paying attention to supply chains. You can't just plug AI into the old grid. The existing electrical infrastructure in most developed countries was built 50 to 70 years ago. It was designed for a world of light bulbs, refrigerators, and televisions. It was not designed for a world where every major corporation is building AI compute clusters that draw megawatts of continuous power. Upgrading the grid to handle this new load doesn't mean tweaking a few substations. It means rebuilding the entire transmission network. We're talking about millions of miles of new copper transmission lines that have to be manufactured, transported, and installed. This is a multi-decade project that requires copper at a scale we've never seen before. And this is just for AI. We haven't even talked about electric vehicles, renewable energy, or the broader electrification of everything. Which brings me to the second pillar of this thesis: the green energy transition. Now, I don't care where you stand politically on climate change. That's irrelevant. What matters is what governments and corporations around the world have already committed to. They've committed to electrifying the global economy, and electrification is just another word for copper deployment. Let's start with electric vehicles. A traditional internal combustion engine car uses about 23 kilograms of copper. Wiring, radiators, starters, nothing crazy. But an electric vehicle? An EV uses about 80 kilograms of copper. That's more than 3 times as much. Now multiply that across the hundreds of millions of vehicles that are supposed to transition to electric over the next 2 decades. The copper demand from EVs alone is staggering, but it doesn't stop there. Wind turbines and solar farms are some of the most copper-intensive infrastructure on the planet. A single offshore wind turbine can contain up to 15 tons of copper. 15 tons. For one turbine, and we're not building one or two. We're building tens of thousands of them. Solar farms require vast amounts of copper wiring to connect the panels and transmit the power back to the grid. Every new renewable energy project is essentially a copper consumption machine, and the scale of the build-out that's been committed to is almost incomprehensible. We're trying to rebuild the entire global energy infrastructure to move away from fossil fuels and onto electricity in about 25 years. That's the timeline that's been set by governments, by corporations, by international agreements. It's ambitious. It's maybe even impossible. But it's happening. And it all requires copper. Copper we haven't mined yet. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Because if demand is exploding, you'd assume supply would rise to meet it, right? That's how markets work. High prices incentivize new production. Miners dig more, supply catches up, problem solved. Except that's not what's happening with copper, not even close. And this is the part that makes copper more like Bitcoin than anyone realizes, because there are no new mines coming online. Let me say that again. There are no significant new copper mines coming online in time to meet this demand surge. And it's not because miners don't want to build them, it's because they can't. Building a major copper mine takes between 17 and 20 years. That's not an exaggeration. That's the average timeline from discovery to production. First, you have to find the deposit. Then you have to prove it's economically viable. Then you have to get permits, which in most developed countries now takes a decade by itself. Environmental reviews, community consultations, legal challenges, it's a bureaucratic nightmare. Then you have to raise billions of dollars in financing. Then you actually have to build the infrastructure, the roads, the processing plants, the power supply, the water systems. And then, finally, you start digging. Even if a company discovered a massive, world-class copper deposit today, right now, that mine wouldn't start producing meaningful amounts of metal until the 2040s. The demand surge is happening in the late 2020s and early 2030s. The supply response won't arrive until the 2040s. Do you see the problem? There's a decade-long gap where demand is screaming, and supply simply cannot respond. And it gets worse. The easy copper is gone. In the early days of mining, you could dig near the surface and pull out high-grade ore. But we've been mining copper for thousands of years. All the easy deposits have been found and exhausted. Now, miners are going deeper. They're digging in more remote locations. They're processing lower-grade ore, which means you have to move more rock to get the same amount of metal. Costs are rising. Energy requirements are rising. And the rate of new discoveries is slowing. We're not finding giant new copper deposits the way we used to. The geological lottery is running cold. S&P Global, one of the most respected research firms in the commodities world, just put out a forecast that should be front-page news, but somehow isn't. They're projecting a 10 million ton annual copper deficit by 2040. 10 million tons. To put that in perspective, that's about 25% of current global demand that simply will not be met at current prices. A 25% shortfall. Imagine if a quarter of the world's oil supply just vanished. What would happen to the price of oil? It would skyrocket. It would cause a global crisis. That's what's coming for copper. And unlike oil, where you can potentially find alternatives or reduce consumption, copper is irreplaceable in most of its applications. You can't build an electric motor without it. You can't wire a building without it. You can't transmit electricity without it. There is no substitute that works at scale. So here's the setup. Demand is about to go vertical because of AI, because of electric vehicles, because of renewable energy, because of grid upgrades. Supply is structurally constrained because there are no new mines, because permitting takes forever, because ore grades are declining. And the deficit is going to hit in the next 5 to 10 years. This is the supply squeeze. And it's not a maybe. It's a mathematical certainty unless something dramatic changes. And I don't see what that something would be. Now here's why I bought 3 tons of physical copper and why I'm buying more every single month. I didn't just buy mining stocks. I didn't buy copper ETFs. I didn't buy futures contracts. I bought the actual metal, physical copper. And I'm storing it. Because I've learned something over 23 years of being in macro markets. I've learned that in a world of infinite digital creation, the only real wealth is physical scarcity. We live in a world where central banks can print unlimited money, where governments can issue unlimited debt, where programmers can write unlimited code. Everything digital can be copied, diluted, inflated. But physical resources? They're different. You can't print copper. You can't code it into existence. You either have it or you don't. And when a physical resource becomes scarce at the exact moment it becomes critical to civilization, its value doesn't just go up, it explodes. I view these 3 tons of copper as a generational hedge. I'm not buying this to flip it next year. I'm buying it because I believe that in the late 2020s and early 2030s, copper is going to transition from being just another industrial metal into something much more important, a strategic asset. What do I mean by that? I mean that companies are going to start stockpiling it. Manufacturers are going to bid up the price, not because they want to speculate, but because they need to secure supply just to keep their factories running. Governments are going to treat it like a national security issue, because if you don't have copper, you can't build your energy infrastructure. You can't build your defense systems. You can't build your technology. Copper is going to become as strategic as oil was in the 20th century, maybe more so. And here's the beautiful part. The price of copper today doesn't reflect any of this yet. It's trading like it's just another cyclical commodity. The market is looking at short-term demand and short-term supply and pricing it based on the last few years of data. But the market isn't pricing in the AI power surge. It's not pricing in the full scale of the EV transition. It's not pricing in the supply cliff that's coming in the 2030s, which means right now, today, copper is mispriced. It's undervalued relative to where it's going to be in 5 years, in 10 years. And that's why I'm buying it. I'm front-running the inevitable panic, because when the manufacturers and the utilities and the governments wake up and realize there's not enough copper to go around, they're going to scramble. And the price is going to move faster than most people can react. By then, it'll be too late to get in at a reasonable price. Some of you are probably wondering, why not just buy mining stocks? If copper is going up, won't the miners benefit? Sure, in theory. But here's the problem with mining stocks. Their valuations are fake. I don't mean that as hyperbole. I mean that mining companies are subject to all kinds of risks that have nothing to do with the price of copper. Political risk, operational risk, management risk, permitting delays, labor strikes, cost overruns. A mining company can own the best copper deposit in the world, but if the government expropriates it, or if there's a civil war, or if the CEO makes a bad acquisition, your investment goes to zero. Physical copper doesn't have those risks. Copper is copper. It doesn't go bankrupt. It doesn't get nationalized. It doesn't depend on competent management. It just sits there, holding its value, waiting for the world to need it. And the world is about to need it desperately. I've been in macro for 23 years. I've called every major market top and bottom for over a decade. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because pattern recognition matters. And the pattern I'm seeing right now with copper is the same pattern I saw with Bitcoin in 2013. A hard supply constraint, explosive demand growth, a market that doesn't understand what's coming, and a massive asymmetry between the current price and the future price. Bitcoin went from double digits to tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not saying copper is going to go up 10,000%, but I am saying it's going to go up a lot more than most people think, and I'm positioning accordingly. From now on, I'm going to share all my moves publicly. I'm done keeping this to myself. I want people to see what I'm doing in real time, because I believe the next decade is going to separate those who understand physical scarcity from those who are still chasing digital narratives. The people who pay attention, who understand the fundamentals, who position early, are going to build generational wealth. The people who ignore this, who think it's too boring or too weird or too unconventional, are going to look back in 2030 and wonder how they missed it. Copper isn't sexy. It doesn't have the hype of a new tech stock or a trendy crypto coin. It's an old metal. It's been around forever. And that's exactly why most people are ignoring it. But the smart money isn't ignoring it. The smart money is quietly accumulating. And I'm telling you this because I want you to be on the right side of this trade. I want you to understand what's happening before it becomes obvious to everyone else. Because once it's obvious, it's too late. The gains are made by those who see it early, who understand the fundamentals, who have the conviction to act before the crowd. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Copper is not just a commodity. It's the foundation of the next industrial revolution. AI needs it. Electric vehicles need it. Renewable energy needs it. The grid needs it. And we don't have enough of it, not even close. The supply cliff is real. The deficit is coming. And the price is going to reflect that reality. The question is, are you going to position yourself now, or are you going to wait until everyone else figures it out? I bought 3 tons. I'm buying 1 more ton every month. I'm storing it. I'm holding it. And I'm not selling until the world realizes what I already know. Copper is the most undervalued strategic asset on the planet right now. This is not financial advice. This is me sharing what I'm doing with my own money. You have to make your own decisions. But if you're paying attention, if you understand supply and demand, If you've seen how markets move when scarcity meets necessity, then you know exactly what's coming. The price of copper today is a gift, and I'll see you in 2030, when the rest of the world catches up.